Hey everyone, Coach Evan here. Today I'm going to go over 5 different versions of squats, when to use them, what they're working, and how to do them properly. The first version of squat that we're going to go over is a goblet squat. A goblet squat simply means we're going to hold our weight up at our chest. That can be done with a kettlebell or a dumbbell. The reason to use the goblet squat is if you don't have access to a bigger piece of equipment like a barbell, and or you're not familiar with the other versions of squatting like a back squat or a front squat. This is also a great intro squat for anyone that is getting into squatting and has not squatted a ton in their past. Squatting is a very simple action. We do it every day. We sit down in chairs and we stand back up. So this one comes a little bit more naturally than, say, a hip hinge type motion. So just squatting the butt down towards the floor in a vertical hip action. So for the goblet squat, we're simply going to take our weight, bring it up to the chest, keep it nice and tidy. And our feet can go wherever they feel comfortable within reason. We don't want to stand with our feet together and hit our squat, but we also don't want to be out too wide in a sumo position. So I like to go with my big toes underneath my hips, which then puts my feet just slightly outside of my hips. And if you like to turn your feet out a little bit or it feels more comfortable to do that, that's totally fine as well. From there, our squat is just like if we're going to sit into a chair, and we actually can even use a chair back behind us to sit down and back into. Our reps and sets are going to be dependent upon our weight that we're using. If we're using a heavier weight, we could do a little less reps but more sets. If we're using less weight, we could do more reps and maybe less sets. Really just depends on the exercise and what is feeling comfortable for you in the time. The second version of squats that we're going to go over is a split squat. Now a split squat requires no weight, but weight can be added to it. So a split squat is similar to a lunge, however, we're going to keep our feet stationary. So I'm going to step 1 foot backwards and 1 foot forward. So I'm in the split stance, as we would say. From there, I'm going to touch my back knee to the floor and press through that front leg into extension, which will also bring my heel down in the back. This is nice because if you don't have any equipment, you can still hit some squats with some challenge too. Reps is going to be your challenger rather than like weight, but of course we can also bring that goblet into this position and do goblet squats in this split position, and that will add a different challenge. And or we can hold the weight even down here to create a different load, more towards the quadriceps and less core activation in this bottom position than in this top position. When we're doing our split squat, we're going to be utilizing primarily quadriceps compared to when we're doing like a goblet squat, it's going to be quadriceps and a little more glutes. So this action is going to point more towards our thigh muscles and more in particularly down towards the lower part of our thigh muscles. Just like with the goblet squat, reps are going to be one way of manipulating it and making it harder or easier, along with sets and or adding weight or taking weight away. Our third version is going to be a Bulgarian split squat. So going off of the second version of that split squat, we're just going to add a bench back behind us for a Bulgarian split squat and or a rear foot elevated split squat. Simple as this. If you can't keep your balance when doing this, you can take a dowel to hold on to so that you can get your foot back and onto the bench back behind you or couch, whatever you have access to. So if your split squat without any weight is a bit too easy for you and you don't have weight to add to it, this would be the next step. And this action is going to be very similar, but we're going to drive a little bit more to that front leg up and down rather than that pushback like we were when we're in that second version, that split stance. Just like the split stance, we can take our weight, bring it up to the chest in a goblet position to add challenge and or hold it down low for more of a quadricep activation and less core activation compared to that goblet position. Our reps and sets will determine difficulty, so higher reps without weight is going to be a little bit harder, but if you have weight, you can split it up into lower reps and more sets. Fourth version of the squat is a barbell back squat. If you have access to a barbell This is one of the best ways that we can load up weight and get stronger in our squat, because the way that it's supported on our shoulders allows us to put more weight on the bar and stress our muscles differently than any of the other squats prior to this. Biggest thing with this is making sure that we have the proper setup so that the bar is set across our upper shoulders and held not on our neck, but actually on the muscles of our upper back and not up on our spine. So first things first is making sure that you get your hands evenly placed left to right. Coming through, making sure you're centered so that that bar does not lean one way or the other way. Standing up to unrack and take a nice step back. Just like with our goblet squat, our foot positioning can be pretty similar. We can go a little bit wider, we can put our toes out. There's just some places we don't want to go, which is our feet being too close and our feet being too wide. So whatever is most comfortable. From there, we're just going to take a seat like we did in the goblet squat. There's going to be a little bit more of a forward lean because of the weight distribution on the back rather than the weight distribution in the front. So we're going to get more of a lean forward in position throughout our squat. This is going to activate a lot of hamstring and glute along with quadriceps, compared to that goblet squat that was a little bit more of just the quadriceps and less hamstring activation. This is a really great way to do lower repetition with higher weight if you're experienced enough to do that, where we can actually get into more of a strength and power profile of lifting because of the weight that we're able to put on. At one point or another with the goblet squat, we can only hold so much weight at the chest. So this is kind of the next best way to start loading up heavier weight and going through lower rep ranges with higher weight for greater stress on the legs, the core, and like I said, hamstrings. The fifth and final squat is a barbell front squat. This is the most challenging squat of them all because of the way that the weight is going to be distributed on the front of the body, similar to the way that a goblet squat is distributed on the body. But when we're using a barbell with weight, it's going to actually have a greater load on the torso and also more weight. So this does require some better flexibility of the wrist for our racked position in the front. And if you don't have that wrist flexibility, I'll show a second version here in a second. But if we do have this wrist flexibility, we're going to set up with our hands just a little more narrow than we would if we were doing a back squat. I always usually go about 1 inch to 2 inches off of the knurling mark here from the smooth to the knurl on both sides. From there, we're going to take a step forward and we're actually going to open our hands and round inward here. And you can see my elbows are now facing forward because when I take this off, that weight is actually going to be resting across the front of my shoulders, not in my neck, not on my collarbones, and I'm not holding the weight in my hands. So if I actually remove my hands here, I would be able to keep it held up. Foot position is going to be very similar to the other squats, but we're going to now have this load in the front, which is much more challenging to the torso, core muscles than the back squat is. You can also see I'm remaining more upright throughout this squat. And as I mentioned, it should rest across. Don't take your hands off, but if you were to, it should stay on there. Rack it back in. Now, if you don't have that wrist flexibility that I was showing there with that big extension to be able to get those elbows up, we actually don't want to be doing this front squat with our elbows down, because then you're just going to be holding however much weight, kind of like in a bottom of a shoulder press position, which is going to make your shoulders more tired than anything else. So the next best version to do with this would be to come underneath and actually cross your arms up so that you can get that barbell to rest across the shoulders. And then get your hands on the bar, always hands on the bar one way or another to secure it. And then the elbows remain up as well in this. I will say that position for myself is a much more challenging position, since I am able to get into that nice wrist extension here where it's nice and comfortable and very secure for me. But if this position is hard for you, there is that second position that I just did there to help you out. Front squat, like I said, is a lot of core activation. It's going to be very tough on all the erectors in the front and the back, but also the quadriceps. It's going to push more of that weight down towards the lower compartment of your quadriceps and through the rectus femoris, which is the main quadricep muscle. Very important to make sure that you're maintaining an upward posture within this as well. So keeping your chin up and the eyes on the wall in front of you. Just like the back squat, you can add a lot more weight to this than say a goblet position or a split squat. So it's a good way to challenge your body once you're comfortable dropping reps, adding weight, and doing those adjustments as you go. These are the 5 different versions of squats that you can utilize on your own to help gain leg strength and also gain core strength with or without equipment. If you like this, make sure you like and subscribe. Otherwise, comment below and let me know what you want to see next.